and I'd like to get inside the heads of the Nazi ideologues of the Third Reich, including Adolf Hitler himself, to understand with clarity what drove this pure evil, and who better to explain Nazi racial ideology than one of its victims, a German Lutheran minister who stood up against it and paid the price for his courage. It's time to meet Pastor Martin Niemoller.
Mein Name ist Martin Niemoller, ein lutherischer Geistlicher, der dafür bekannt ist, ein leidenschaftlicher Gegner des vielleicht verabscheuungswürdigsten Menschen der Geschichte zu sein, Adolf Hitler. Allerdings muss ich gestehen, dass mein Erbe etwas gemischt ist, wie wir sehen werden.
I was born in Lippstadt, Germany, and became in my younger years a submarine commander during the First World War. I won the Iron Cross First Class, the highest decoration for bravery. After the war, I turned to different pursuits. I decided to take up the study of theology, a very different path from my wartime exploits. I was ordained in 1931, taking up a pastorate at St. Anne's Church in an affluent suburb of Berlin. Yet, I was an ardent German nationalist, and it is with considerable shame that I must confess to being an early supporter of this man Hitler. I welcomed his rise to power in Germany as I penned my autobiography in 1933, From U-Boat to Pulpit. It was the Nazis' praise that helped bring this book to fame in Germany, becoming a bestseller. I, as so many in Germany in those days, referred to those years of the Weimar Republic as years of darkness. It was a time of national humiliation. It was my hope that Hitler would bring about a great revival of the German nation. We longed for certainty in an uncertain age. But by the fall of 1934, my faith in Hitler completely collapsed. I saw the dark side of the Third Reich. It was at that time that I helped organize, with other members of the clergy, what we called the Confessing Church, a group devoted to swimming against the tide. We were alarmed by what we saw as the Nazification of the German churches, as anti-Christian ideas were increasingly tolerated by both clergy and laity. We were especially alarmed by the racial doctrines of the Nazis, that is, Nazi racial ideology. Yet some historians look back and question whether Hitler even had an ideology. After all, he was, first and foremost, a politician. And we must ask, what politician actually has an ideology? If we wanted to find some coherent ideology in Hitler's mind, what would we look at as proof? Of course, we have Hitler's writings, the most famous of which was his autobiography, Mein Kampf, My Struggle. Doesn't Hitler plainly state his ideology in this book?
Die gesamte menschliche Kultur, alle Ergebnisse von Kunst, Wissenschaft und Technologie, die wir heute vor uns sehen, sind fast ausschließlich das Produkt der Arier. Wenn wir die Menschheit in 3 Gruppen einteilen würden, die Gründer der Kultur, die Kulturträger, Kulturzerstörer, als Vertreter der ersten Gruppe kamen nur die Arier in Frage. Von ihm stammen die Grundlagen und Mauern der gesamten menschlichen Schöpfung.
We have a problem, however. Mein Kampf, it seems, was written after Adolf Hitler became a politician. And what politician tells the truth even in the book he writes? If we can't trust what he wrote, what about Hitler's speeches? Such an orator he was, capable of captivating an audience like no one else, even like a preacher. He could have been quite a preacher. Didn't Adolf Hitler's speeches express his true ideology? Unfortunately, his speeches were also delivered after he became a politician. If we can't trust Hitler's writings and can't trust his speeches, what about his actions? Don't actions speak louder than words? Except Hitler was not just a politician, he was an opportunist. So even in his actions, he tried to please everyone. To the capitalists, he promised a capitalist paradise. To the socialists, he promised a socialist paradise. And to everyone, he promised a great resurgence of Germany as a world power. In the final analysis, Hitler's actions proved nothing. We must find something else, perhaps some documents that he wrote before he ever became a politician. Here we have the young Hitler, standing in a crowd celebrating Germany's entry into World War I. Hitler, of course, served in the war as a corporal. That was certainly a point in Hitler's life before he became a politician. Do we perhaps have a document dating from that period? Well, we do happen to have such a document, a letter written by Hitler during the time when he was employed by the German army to gather intelligence on the inroads of socialism into the ranks of the military. Of course, Hitler equated Jews with socialists, and he wrote his notorious letter on the Jewish question, dated September 16th, 1919.
Antisemitismus als politische Bewegung sollte und kann nicht durch emotionale Faktoren bestimmt werden.
This statement comes as a shock to most people. Wasn't Adolf Hitler extremely emotional in his anti-Semitism? When we even mention the name Hitler, we think of him ranting and raving, shouting and screaming. And yet he writes that anti-Semitism cannot be determined by emotional factors. He goes on.
Sondern durch die Erkenntnis der Tatsachen. Und diese Fakten sind: Erstens ist das Judentum eindeutig eine rassische und keine religiöse Gruppe.
Importantly, there was a great shift that took place in the 19th century. From religious anti-Semitism, calling Jews Christ killers and seeking either to convert them or murder them, to racial anti-Semitism. Jews came to be defined as a racial, not a religious group, and Jewishness was defined as something in the blood. In the past, if you were lucky, you could escape persecution by converting to Christianity. No more. No certificate of baptism could change the Jewishness in the blood. This shift laid the groundwork for what would become exterminatory anti-Semitism.
Alles, was für den Menschen eine Quelle höheren Lebens ist, sei es Religion, Sozialismus oder Demokratie, ist für den Juden lediglich Mittel zum Zweck, nämlich die Befriedigung seiner Macht und Geldgier.
How many times down through history has that charge been aired? Money-grubbing Jew. The next sentence in Hitler's letter is perhaps his most important.
Sein Handeln wird zu einer Rassentuberkulose der Völker führen.
Jews are considered to be an infection, a disease. And how does a healthy body combat disease? I am not a physician, but I understand that there are certain autoimmune reactions. It's the lymph nodes that secrete white blood cells, isn't this correct? Which silently course through the bloodstream and identify the invading agent and kill it. Now, does this reaction happen consciously? Am I aware that when I am attacked by a virus, my body fights it in this way? Am I emotional about it? Are the white blood cells emotional? Do they announce to the invading bacteria, I hate you, I hate you? Of course not. This is simply the response of a healthy body to disease. And this is the essence of racial anti-Semitism. In Hitler's mind, Jews were a disease of the body politic, and the healthy body fights this disease without emotion. People are flabbergasted at this. What do you mean? The Nazis didn't go around spewing hate? Technically, I must confess, they did not. Noted Holocaust survivor Elie Wiesel was asked, "Did you feel their hatred?" He thought for a moment and replied,
To be honest, no. We could not even say that they hated us. We weren't worthy of their hatred. They didn't even hate us.
"The healthy body simply kills, and it does so without emotion."
Daraus folgt, rein emotional begründeter Antisemitismus wird seinen letzten Ausdruck in Form von Pogromen finden, die willkürlich und daher nicht wirklich wirksam sind.
What is a pogrom? There had been many pogroms across Eastern Europe and Russia during the Tsarist era. Basically, they were organized riots, aided and abetted by the authorities themselves. Emotional? Yes. Violent? Yes. But then it was over. The Nazi attitude toward pogroms was, surprisingly enough, negative. Why, you would imagine that the Nazis would applaud pogroms. But such things were, in their eyes, un-German. After all, they were technically illegal, even though the authorities themselves approved them. Hitler wanted everything to happen by law, and that's why Hitler called them capricious and not truly effective.
Der rationale Antisemitismus muss jedoch eine systematische, legale Kampagne gegen die Juden betreiben, indem er ihnen die besonderen Privilegien entzieht, die sie im Gegensatz zu den anderen unter uns lebenden Ausländern genießen.
The last word people associate with the Nazis is legal. But for Hitler and his minions, this was very important. They passed law after devastating law. That was the German way. And in the end, they made murder legal. Jews, after all, were considered foreigners. Never mind that they had been living among us for centuries, that they felt more at home in Germany than in any other country on earth. We must revoke any privileges they have in law.
Aber das Endziel muss die Entfernung der Juden überhaupt.
Die Entfernung der Juden überhaupt. Historians scrutinize every word in German, trying to find out exactly what Hitler meant. The complete removal. Was Hitler's anti-Semitism murderous even at that early date? Characteristically, he writes in euphemism. He is deliberately vague, as if to say, I have a nightmare. Jews are present. I have a dream. Jews disappear. He doesn't say how they are to disappear, simply gone. But thanks to this important letter from 1919, we know that what Hitler wrote years later in Mein Kampf, after he became a politician, is in fact accurate. This was his racial ideology. Here are Hitler's words in Mein Kampf.
Ich begann, Juden zu sehen, die sich in meinen Augen vom Rest der Menschheit unterschieden. Gab es irgendeine Form von Schmutz oder Verschwendung, insbesondere im kulturellen Leben, ohne dass mindestens ein Jude daran beteiligt war? Wenn man auch nur vorsichtig in einen solchen Abszess schnitt, fand man, wie eine Made in einem verwesenden Körper, oft geblendet vom plötzlichen Licht, einen Kiekel.
What Hitler wanted was an amoral anti-Semitism, emotionless, in his mind, rational, without morality, amoral. Basically, he wanted a few thousand hitmen. Now, when Al Capone hired a hitman, was the hitman filled with hatred at his object? Did he even know his victim? Usually not. He was simply doing a job. I have nothing against you personally, I'm just shooting you. And so it was with the Nazis. A few thousand hitmen, the elite, those who truly understood Nazi racial ideology, the SS. Nazism can be understood as a kind of religion. As a theologian, I can address this, but it was, if anything, an anti-religion religion. You see, when we study the great religions, at least of the West, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, we discover that they have certain things in common. A beginning point, describing the genesis of everything, then a progression, a pathway that people are to follow, usually with many ups and downs. Invariably, they are directional. They point us toward some goal, toward an end, a better day. In Judaism, there is the concept of the Messiah and a messianic age. In Christianity, we have the idea of the second coming. In Islam, there is a final judgment of humanity. Marxism, a Jewish thing in the eyes of the Nazis, involved class struggle, culminating in a classless society. Such ideas were anathema to Hitler and the Nazis.
Wenn der Jude mit Hilfe seines marxistischen Glaubensbekenntnisses über die anderen Völker der Welt siegt, wird seine Krone der Trauerkranz der Menschheit sein und dieser Planet wird sich, wie er es vor Tausenden von Jahren tat, durch den Äther ohne Menschen bewegen, Männer.
The Nazis constructed their own religion. Hitlerism was a religion. Make no mistake about it, they had their own high priest, Hitler. The SS was a kind of priesthood. They employed the language of sacrifice. They had their own holy book, Mein Kampf, their own rituals, their own initiation ceremonies, all the trappings of religion, and especially blind faith. But for the Nazis, the idea of an end, a messianic age, was boring, stagnation. What do you have in the end? The lion laying down with the lamb? The lion should eat the lamb. There must be an endless process, a continuing purification of the race, a kind of social Darwinism that will never end. Eventually, said the Nazis, we will conquer the entire world. But even then it will not end. Those who were allies, we will someday fight. The Italians, the Arabs, the Japanese, an endless purification. Rather than a directional arrow, history is an endless narrowing spiral, leaving in the end only the purest of the purest of the purest of the pure. And even when every last Jew has been eliminated, it cannot be over. There will still be the Jewish spirit that can infect even non-Jews. And that is why one day I, Martin Niemoller, would be diagnosed by the Nazis with the Jewish spirit. The tale of my suffering will await another day.